Hi everyone, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles, the series of books and videos on American history as seen through the lives of the presidents of the United States. This episode is from the life of Warren Harding, and the focus is a young man buys a newspaper. The Pilgrims came over from Europe in 1620, landing at Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, and the Harding family, the first of them coming over from Europe just a couple of years later, 1623. With an English Puritan background, the Hardings initially settled just outside of Boston in Braintree, Massachusetts. But the Harding line was almost completely severed during the Revolutionary War during a violent Indian attack. Some of the survivors of the family moved their way west into Pennsylvania, and then it was Amos Harding who packed up the rest of his family belongings, put them in the covered wagons, and headed further west into Ohio. Ohio in Blooming Grove, just a tiny hamlet a little bit north of Columbus, kind of in the middle of the state. Just a handful of farms initially, a couple of buildings. The Hardings were part of the initial group that were basically building Blooming Grove from scratch. You skip ahead a couple of generations, you get to George Harding, but everybody called him Tyron. That was his middle name. He had served briefly in the Civil War as a volunteer, came back. He married Phoebe Dickerson, still in Blooming Grove, working their farm, but Tyron had some other ambitions, and he actually studied to be a physician, a homeopathic doctor. And Phoebe also got into the medical profession. She became a midwife, so they had other ways of supplementing their income, but really the farm was the major thing that was keeping the family going. Now, the Hardings had 8 children. The oldest, was born November 2nd, 1865. They named him Warren, although his mother always called him Winnie. The first president of the United States born after the Civil War. Now, Harding's mother was really the most intimate relationship that he had in his youth. She was a devout Baptist, helped Lord teach him to read, very protective of her children, and she loved flowers, something that Warren Harding always remembered. As he became an adult, he always made sure every Sunday morning a bouquet of fresh flowers would be delivered to his mother. Well, Harding spent the first 8 years of his life in Blooming Grove. Typical farm boy. He would milk the cows, water and feed the horses, clear the land, till the soil, all the kinds of things that a young farm boy would do. He went to the local school, and then he learned to play an instrument. His father bought him a cornet. Now, he's 10 years old now at this point, and the family had moved to Caledonia, Ohio, just about 15 miles away. They thought they might be able to get a little bit more medical business to go with the new farm that they were going to establish. And again, Harding got this horn, and he was learning basically every brass instrument there was. Also had some odd jobs. One of the best for him, he and a buddy, they'd go around and paint barns and bring some family income. Now, Tyron dabbled in a variety of things, including a part interest in the local newspaper. It was called the Caledonia Argus. Now, Warren Harding's only 12 years old at the time, but he became what was called a printer's devil, a young apprentice, basically do anything and everything around the paper. He would learn how to stick the type, feed the press, make up the forms, wash the rollers, and he really liked it, and it was a chance to sort of get his hands dirty, quite literally, in a bit of a profession at a very young age. Now, money was pretty tight for the Harding family, so they were on the move again. There wasn't a lot of medical business as they thought, so they moved onto a 42-acre farm, but the family very much committed to education. So at the age of 14, it was time for boarding school for Warren Harding, and he was off to Ohio Central College in Iberia, Ohio. It's the same school that his father had gone to for college. In fact, he borrowed some of his father's old books as Warren Harding became very popular on the Iberia campus. He joined the Philomathic Literary Society, where he became its president. He also played the alto horn, continuing the music in the Iberia Brass Band, and he became the editor of the college paper, The Spectator. It was a 4-page paper, and Harding in his senior year made sure to get that out every 2 weeks in his last semester. He said, "The Spectator is taken by every family in our city, excepting a few stingy old grumblers who take no more interest in home enterprise than a mule in a hive of bees." It was successful until he graduated, and then the Spectator basically folded because didn't have Warren Harding anymore to push it. Harding, a college graduate, 1882. He's still only 17 years old. The family had been on the move again. Now he's moving to a larger city, Marion, Ohio, the county seat, 4,000 people, that's the population. Again, maybe some would see that as a small town. Warren Harding saw that as a big city. There were 3 rail lines that were coming into Marion. A couple of large manufacturing companies were settling in, a new town hall. He's a college graduate. trying to find his new place in the world. He started out as a teacher, did that for a year, didn't really work out, so maybe study the law. He tried that. He saw Blackstone's commentaries were boring to him. He didn't want to just study all day. And so he had a little success selling some insurance, but again, that wasn't really the career he wanted to pursue. The best thing that he did at the time, again, late teenage years, he made friends. He liked people and they liked him. He liked being one of the boys, shooting pool, playing poker, local skating rink where he'd hang out, and of course being a member of the Marion People's Band where he would continue to play his brass instruments. Well, in May of 1884, his father, Tyron, bought a share in one of the three local newspapers, the Marion Daily Star. Well, Warren Harding's excited about this. That newspaper feeling had been in his blood a little bit, and so he actually was going to be the editor. He's only 18 years old at the time. One of the benefits of being an editor of a local paper is to get free passes on the railroads, because they would print the railway schedules in the paper, pretty much travel the entire country on any of the railroads for free, and Harding took advantage of this almost immediately. Harding had followed in his father's footsteps to be aligned with the Republican Party, and the Republican National Convention was held in June of 1884 in relatively nearby Chicago. Well, Harding's now a newsman. He's excited about this. I'm going to go cover that convention, and his favorite Republican, James Blaine, the former Speaker of the House and Senator from Maine, was up for the nomination, and Harding was thrilled to watch Blaine get that nomination, got back on the railroad, ready to write about it in the Marion Daily Star, and the problem was he got home and there was a padlock on the door. See, they had bought the Star out of bankruptcy from the sheriff, but it turns out that the property that Tyron Harding had put up as collateral actually had a judgment against it, and so it was no longer any good. The sheriff put the padlock back on the door. But Harding wanted to be in the newspaper business. There were two other papers in town. There was the Independent, that was the Republican leading paper, despite the title, and there was the Marion Mirror. This was the Democrat leading paper, and James Vaughn was the one leading that. And so Harding went to see him, look for a reporter's job. He was hired, give him a shot, $7 a week. It didn't last, in part because of those political differences. Harding showed up one day wearing a James Blaine for President hat. Vaughn didn't care for that much, told him to take it off, and Harding said, you know what, I don't need this. I'm going to keep my hat on, and he walked out, and that was his very short tenure at the Marion Mirror. Well, it was pretty sad on election night because Blaine lost a close election for Grover Cleveland. Harding got together with a couple of his buddies, Jack Warwick and John Sickel, having a round of oysters at Miley's restaurant, and Harding had an idea. He thought for $300 they could buy that Marion Daily Star, the three of them. Again, now he had just turned 19 years old. None of the three were over 23. They said, why not? But this was not just a lark for Warren Harding. He was serious about it. He didn't realize he was going to be doing this as his life business for the next 30 years, so central to his character and his life, but he was serious about giving this a shot, even though it was not going to be easy. The Star had only about 500 subscribers. It was a 4-page paper, 10 cents a week for a subscriber, 3 cents for an individual issue. At the time, there was no delivery service. You wanted your paper, you stopped by, had a chat, picked it up. It was the smallest of the 3 papers, but it was the only daily, so that was a bit of an advantage. They were starting to operate in the tiny offices, just 2 rooms for the Marion Daily Star. And Jack Warwick, one of his partners, said there was never a place more generally and particularly unfitted in all its appointments for a newspaper office than this second floor front and back, which we occupied immediately following the adoption of the sick kitten. That's what they called the Star at the time because it was kind of a sick kitten. They planned to turn it around. But their competitors were not going to concede anything. There was competition out there for advertising in particular, including government ads that would go into the paper. If there was a Republican government ad to go in, it would typically go into the Independent. And George Crawford, who had been in the newspaper business for longer than Warren Harding had even been alive, wasn't about to just let this upstart take away his business. And so he started taking some pot shots in his own editorial page against the new owners at the Star. Well, Warren Harding and his team were ready to fight back. "Some man is a willful liar," they wrote in the Star. "We refer to the man who is telling around that there will be another change in the Star. The only change anticipated is that of making the paper better. Persons expecting to damage the Star by their silly lies are wasting their breath." He was committed to this, and he wasn't going to take nonsense from the competitors. Now, Harding did everything in the paper, including going out and finding stories. He would visit local stores, the bank, the hotel, the lunch counter, that roller rink, the courthouse, out on the street corner. He wanted to tell local stories, good, positive stories, feel-good stories. That's what Harding was focused about. He talked to people. The next day, it'd be in the print in the paper. He eventually would establish what they called the Creed of the Stars, about a dozen things that really everyone was expected to take root on, and a couple of them really stand out. Be decent, be fair, be generous. Boost, don't knock. Warren Harding was a booster, not a knocker. There's good in everybody. Bring out the good and never needlessly hurt the feelings of anybody. This creed could be just as much the creed of Warren Harding as it was of the Marion Daily Star. Of course, the two were very much one and one together, but this is really what Harding was all about, and it was helping to make the paper successful. Now, one of his partners, Jack Sickel, said, this one really isn't for me. He opted out early, sold his shares back to Harding, but Warwick did stick around for quite a while. But this was Warren Harding's paper. He was the heart and soul of it. And he really was trying to do anything he could to get advertising. And that was one of the hardest things. Eventually, he started to show that ads in the paper actually helped those businesses. And he was having some success as circulation grew. The town was growing, Marion, and was his paper. After 5 years, they had more than doubled to 1,100 subscribers. Another 5 years, 1895, more than doubled again, 2,500 subscribers. And they went from a point where insolvency seemed like it was right around the corner almost every day, now to making a nice profit. Well, that competitor was not about to lie down and just let this happen. So George Crawford continued to take shots at Harding and the Star in his paper, and he pulled out a rumor that had been circulating since the Harding family days at Blooming Grove, that there was mixed race background, black blood in the Harding line. And the Independent said, "We have no desire to draw the color line on the kink-haired youth that sees fit to use his smut machine only as a receptacle for a low order or adjectives, as nature did it for him." Well, people reading between the lines knew that this was this rumor of mixed race background coming around in print, and the Hardings were really angry. Not just Warren Harding, but also his father. They didn't argue about this one in the paper. They went over to Crawford. The Independent office basically told him, "Knock it off. We want a retraction." And the rumor of the story was that Tyron Harding actually had a shotgun under his arm when he went over to sort of make this threat. And this actually did cool things down. Crawford wrote the retraction, and some of this antagonistic writing back and forth tended to stop. Well, Harding was very popular in town, although it doesn't appear that there was a steady girl in his life until Florence Kling came along. Now, she was 5 years older than he was. She was divorced. She had a child. She wasn't really taking care of that child. She had left that in the hands of her parents. Her father happened to be the richest man in town, Amos Kling, but he and his daughter didn't really get along. Now, she loved the outdoors. She loved animals, horses, and dogs. She was an excellent pianist. But they were both sort of hard-headed. It didn't get along all that well, and Amos Kling did not want her to marry again to Warren Harding as her second husband. Didn't think that he was the right fit up to her from a stature standpoint, and he actually threatened to disown his daughter, Florence, if she went ahead with the wedding. Well, she did anyway, and he did disown his daughter and didn't really speak to her for almost a decade, but they did get married July 8th of 1891, built a home on Mount Vernon Avenue in Marion, Ohio. Now, Florence had another characteristic to bring to the marriage. She had a knack for business. She was organized and disciplined, came down to the Daily Star and started to make the business side of the paper run better. She took over the delivery service that they had just implemented, getting some good delivery boys out there to do a really good job. And Florence Harding said, "I went down there intending to help out for a few days and remained 14 years. Now, the Hardings also were investing in the paper. They would buy always sort of the latest equipment. Warren Harding believed in this. They were finally able to move into a 3-story building on East Center Street. So things were really moving up for Harding, the paper. He's now married. Editorials in the paper, strictly Republican, and he was starting to get to be well known in Republican circles, perhaps an opportunity for him to get into politics. But that's a story for another day. That is Warren Harding and A Young Man Buys a Newspaper from the life of Warren Harding. For more presidential chronicles, check out my books on Amazon.com, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm David Fisher, and this is Presidential Chronicles.